knock.
Who's there?
Welcome.
Welcome. Who?
Welcome to Heavy Storytelling. How are you doing today? You're going to be reading a story, but first up we are going to be doing Days of Division to Daniel, and then we're going to be reading the Bible, and then we're going to be doing Songs of Smith, Kimberly, and then we're going to be reading the Two Towers. I hope you enjoy. Make sure to, I'm going to do the funny thing again. Make sure to blow up the like button, shoot the subscribe button, and Steve the bell.
Steve the bell.
That made no sense, but
You didn't quit it, did you?
Nope. Hello, I'm Daniel. And now for Devotions with Daniel. Okay, August 6th, right?
Yes.
The King Eternal. He has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Revelation 19:16. There aren't many kings left anymore. The monarchy from the government, in which power resides with an individual until death, and is then passed to an heir, saw steep declines in the last century. Much of the world was ruled by royalty in 1900. Today, only 26 nations have monarchs. Queen Elizabeth serves as the head of the state for 15 countries in the British Commonwealth of Nations. Citizens living in a monarchy have a better understanding of the word sovereign than those who don't. But few live in the realm where the monarch possesses absolute sovereignty. An absolute sovereign has unlimited right to control everything and everyone within his or her territory. In politics, this sometimes creates reigns of terror in the divine realm. Accepting the absolute sovereignty of Jesus Christ gives us unlimited peace. He is the King of the Jews, Matthew 2:2, the King of Israel, John 1:49, the King of righteousness, Hebrews 7:2, the King eternal, 1 Timothy 1:17, and the King of Kings, Revelation 19:16. Let his absolute reign comfort you today. My choice is King Jesus. He's reigning above. His service is gladness. His banner is love. Eliza Edmonds Hewitt.
So, according to that little devotion, there are 26 reigning monarchs in the Bible.
I know.
There are 26 reigning monarchs in the world. I don't know if that's still an accurate figure or not, but I assume that it's at least accurate whenever that book was published. I never performed for Queen Elizabeth. However, I have performed for 2 of the 26 reigning monarchs, the King of Jordan and the King of the Netherlands. So that's interesting little tidbit fact. We are now on 2 Samuel chapter 15. We've been reading through the life of a reigning monarch from 1000-ish BC. And let's just continue. This is the English Standard Version. Once again, 2 Samuel chapter 15. After this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate. And when any man had a dispute to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And when he said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right, but there is no man designated by the king to hear you." Then Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were judge in the land! Then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." And whenever a man came near to pay homage to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Then thus Absalom did to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I lived at Geshur in Aram, saying, 'If the Lord will indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will offer worship to the Lord.' The king said to him, 'Go in peace.' So he arose and went to Hebron, but Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, 'As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king at Hebron.' With Absalom went 200 men from Jerusalem who were invited guests, and they went in their innocence and knew nothing. And while Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city Gilo, and the conspiracy grew strong, and the people with Absalom kept increasing. And a messenger came to David, saying, 'The hearts of the men of Israel have gone after Absalom.' Then David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, 'Arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. Go quickly, lest he overtake us quickly, and bring down ruin on us, and strike the city with the edge of the sword.' And the king's servants said to the king, 'Behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king decides.' So the king went out, and all his household after him, and the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. And the king went out, and all the people after him, and they halted at the last house. And all his servants passed by him, and all the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had followed him from Gath passed on before the king. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why do you also go with us? Go back and stay with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your home. You came only yesterday, and shall I today make you wander about with us, since I go I know not where? Go back and take your brothers with you, and may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you." But Ittai answered the king, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king shall be, whether for death or for life, there also will your servant be." And David said to Ittai, "Go then, pass on." So Ittai the Gittite passed on with all his men and all the little ones who were with him. And all the land wept aloud as all the people passed by. And the king crossed the brook Kidron, and all the people passed on toward the wilderness. And Abiathar came up, and behold, Zadok came also with all the Levites, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God until the people had all passed out of the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and let me see both it and his dwelling place. But if he says, 'I have no pleasure in you,' behold, here I am. Let him do to me what seems good to him." The king also said to Zadok the priest, "Are you not a seer? Go back to the city in peace with your 2 sons, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait at the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me." So Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. But David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot and with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up weeping as they went. And it was told David, "Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom." And David said, "O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." While David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat torn and dirt on his head. David said to him, "If you go on with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, 'I will be your servant, O king, as I have been your father's servant in time past,' so now I will be your servant, then you will defeat for me the counsel of Ahithophel. Are you not Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, with you there? So whatever you hear from the king's house, tell it to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests. Behold, their 2 sons are with them there, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send to me everything you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city just as Absalom was entering Jerusalem. And that is the end of 2 Samuel chapter 15. And not a very good time for the monarchy. And as we were speaking of monarchs earlier. So we are now on chapter, I believe it is 7, that is correct, of the Two Towers, book 2, which is book 4 of Lord of the Rings, if you're counting. So what happened in the last chapter is... this chapter is called Journey to the Crossroads. What happened in the last chapter was Faramir took Frodo to a forbidden pool, and he said, hey, look, there's this dude here, he's kind of creepy, and we're going to shoot him. So he gave the order and said, okay, shoot the creepy dude, and by the way, Frodo looked at the pool, so let's cut his head off. And that is the end of the story.
Dad.
And here's Kimberly to say how it really happened.
Basically, what happened was the long way round of Gollum was at the pool, and they're like, hey, there's this thing at the pool, and Frodo's like, oh, that's Gollum, I should go get him. And he goes over, and after getting Gollum to cooperate, I guess, he's like, hey, sorry I left you, and then they bring him up, and then they say that as long as Gollum's with Frodo, they can go on their land. And then, and I think that's about it, right? And they're about to go on their way.
Wait.
Oh, we have 3 people. Hello.
Hello, 3 people.
Wait, I have to add something to the synopsis.
Oh,
What is
JJ
it,
wants
David?
to add something to the synopsis. I can relay it.
It wasn't
Hi,
they
Rebecca.
it wasn't they could roam free in their land. They can roam free in their land. And if they see Gollum one more time,
Without Frodo, then Gollum's dead.
Yep.
dead.
Okay, if they see Frodo one more time without Frodo,
Gollum.
if they see... It'd be impossible for them to see Frodo without Frodo. But if they see Frodo... Gosh.
Gollum
If they see
without
Gollum
Frodo.
without Frodo, then... And he's out of here.
Got a different name.
You're out of here! Alright.
And Gollum's
So,
more by the pressure.
This is chapter 7, and it is a super short chapter. It's only 9 pages. So, we're going to go ahead and get started with that. It is chapter 7. It is called Journey to the Crossroads. Let me begin. Frodo and Sam returned to their beds and lay there in silence, resting for a little, while men bestirred themselves. The comma makes a big difference. While men bestirred themselves, and the business of the day began. After a while, water was brought to them, and then they were led to a table where food was set for 3. Faramir broke his fast with them. He had not slept since the battle on the day before, yet he did not look weary. When they had finished, they stood up. May no hunger trouble you on the road, said Faramir. You have little provision, but some small store of food fit for travelers I have ordered to be stowed in your packs. You will have no lack of water as you walk in Ithilien, but do not drink of any stream that flows from Imlad Morgul, the Valley of Living Death. This I also must tell you. My scouts and watchers have all returned, even some that have crept within sight of the Morannon. They all find a strange thing. The land is empty. Nothing is on the road, and no sound of foot or horn or bowstring is anywhere to be heard. A waiting silence broods above the nameless land. I do not know what this portends, but the time draws swiftly to some great conclusion. Storm is coming. Hasten while you may. If you are ready, let us go. The sun will soon rise above the shadow. The hobbits' packs were brought to them, a little heavier than they had been, and also 2 stout staves of polished wood, shod with iron, and with carven heads through which ran plated leather thongs. I have no fitting gifts to give you at our parting, said Faramir, but take these staves. They may be of service to those who walk or climb in the wild. The men of the White Mountains use them, though these have been cut down to your height and newly shod. They are made of the fair tree Lebethron, beloved of the wood rights of Gondor, and a virtue has been set upon them of finding and returning. May that virtue not wholly fail under the shadow into which you go. The hobbits bowed low. Most gracious host, said Frodo, it was said to me by Elrond half-elven that I should find friendship upon the way, secret and unlooked for. Certainly, I looked for no such friendship as you have shown. To have found it turns evil to great good. Now they made ready to depart. Gollum was brought out of some corner or hiding hole, and he seemed better pleased with himself than he had been, though he kept close to Frodo and avoided the glance of Faramir. Your guide must be blindfolded, said Faramir, but you and your servant Samwise are released from this, if you wish. Gollum squealed and squirmed and clutched at Frodo when they came to bind his eyes, and Frodo said, blindfold us all 3, and cover up my eyes first, and then perhaps he will see that no harm is meant. This was done, and they were led from the cave of Henneth Anun. After they had passed the passages and stairs, they felt the cool morning air fresh and sweet about them. Still blind, they went on for some little time, up and then gently down. At last the voice of Faramir ordered them to be uncovered. They stood under the boughs of the woods again. No noise of the falls could be heard, for a long southward slope lay now between them and the ravine in which the stream flowed. To the west they could see light through the trees, as if the world came there to a sudden end, at a brink looking out only onto sky. Here is the last parting of our ways, said Faramir. If you take my counsel, you will not turn eastward yet. Go straight on, for thus you will have the cover of the woodland for many miles. On your west is an edge where the land falls into the great vales. What is the noises? I'm hearing some weird breathing noises. Sorry, it's distracting. Lost my place.
No breathing allowed.
Yeah, no breathing. If you hold your breath. All right. Woodland for many miles. On your west is an edge where the land falls into the great vales, sometimes suddenly and sheer, sometimes in long hillsides. Keep near to this edge and the skirts of the forest. In the beginning of your journey, you may walk under daylight. I think I heard that breathing. The land dreams in a false peace, and for a while all evil is withdrawn. Fare you well while you may. He embraced the hobbits then, after the manner of his people, stooping and placing his hands upon their shoulders and kissing their foreheads. Go with the goodwill of all good men, he said. They bowed to the ground. Then he turned, and without looking back he left them and went to his 2 guards that stood at a little distance away. They marveled to see with what speed these green-clad men now moved, vanishing almost in the twinkling of an eye. The forest where Faramir had stood seemed empty and drear, as if a dream had passed. Frodo sighed and turned back southward, as if to mark his disregard of all such courtesy. Gollum was scrabbling in the mold at the foot of a tree. I guess he was playing a word game with little tiles. Scrabbling. Whatever. Hungry again already, thought Sam. Well, now for it again. I don't know what that means. Have they gone at last? Sorry. Let me get back to my Gollum voice, which isn't very good. Have they gone at last? Said Gollum. Nasty, wicked men. Smeagol's neck still hurts him. Yes, it does. Let's go. Yes, "Let us go," said Frodo. "But if you can only speak ill of those who showed you mercy, keep silent." "Nice, master," said Gollum. "Smeagol was only joking. Always forgives, he does. Yes, yes, even nice master's little trickses. Oh, yes, nice master, nice Smeagol." Frodo and Sam did not answer. Hoisting their packs and taking their staves in hand, they passed on into the wood of Ithilien. Twice that day they rested and took a little of the food provided by Faramir, dried fruits and salted meat, enough for many days, and bread enough to last while it was still fresh. Gollum ate nothing. The sun rose and passed overhead unseen and began to sink, and the light through the trees to the west grew golden, and always they walked in cool green shadow, and all about them was silence. The birds seemed to have flown away or to have fallen dumb. Darkness came early to the silent woods, and before the fall of night they halted, weary, for they had walked 7 leagues or more from Henneth Anun. Frodo lay and slept away the night on the deep mold beneath the ancient tree. Sam, beside him, was more uneasy. He woke many times, but there was never a sign of Gollum, who had slipped off as soon as the others had settled to rest. Whether he had slept by himself in some hole nearby, or had wandered restlessly prowling through the night, he did not say, but he returned with the first glimmer of light, and roused his companions. "Must get up? Yes, they must," he said. "Long ways to go still, south and east. Hobbits must make haste." That day passed much as the day before had gone, except that the silence seemed deeper, the air grew heavy, and it began to be stifling under the trees. It felt as if thunder was brewing. Gollum often paused, sniffing the air, and then he would mutter to himself and urge them to greater speed. As the third stage of their day's march drew on and afterward waned, the forest opened out, and the trees became larger and more scattered. Great ilexes of huge girth, stood dark and solemn in wide glades, with here and there among them hoary ash trees and giant oaks just putting out their brown-green buds. About them lay long lawns of green grass, dappled with celandine and anemones, white and blue, now folded for sleep, and there were acres populous with the leaves of woodland hyacinths. Already their sleek bell stems were thrusting through the mold. No living creature, beast or bird, was to be seen, but in those open places Gollum grew afraid, and they walked now with caution, flitting from one long shadow to another. Light was fading fast when they came to the forest end. There they sat under an old gnarled oak that sent its roots twisting like snakes down a steep, crumbling bank. A deep, dim valley lay before them. On its further side the woods gathered again, blue and gray under the sullen evening, and marched on southward. To the right the mountains of Gondor glowed remote in the west under a fire-flecked sky. To the left lay darkness, the towering walls of Mordor, and out of that darkness the long valley came, falling steeply into an ever-widening trough toward the Anduin. At its bottom ran a hurrying stream. Frodo could hear its stony voice coming up through the silence, and beside it on the hither side a road went winding down like a pale ribbon, down into chill grey mists that no gleam of sunset touched. There it seemed to Frodo that he descried far off, floating as it were on a shadowy sea, the high, dim tops and broken pinnacles of old towers, forlorn and dark. He turned to Gollum. "Do you know where we are?" he said. "Yes, master. Dangerous places. This is the road from the Tower of the Moon. Master, down to the ruined city by the shores of the river. The ruined city. Yes, very nasty place, full of enemies. We shouldn't have taken men's advice. Hobbitses have come a long way out of the path. Must go east now, away up there." He waved his skinny arm toward the darkling mountains. "And we can't use this road. Oh, no! Cruel peoples come this way, down from the tower." Frodo looked down on to the road, and at any rate, nothing was moving on it now. It appeared lonely and forsaken, running down to an empty ruins in the mist. But there was an evil feeling in the air, as if things might indeed be passing up and down that eyes could not see. Frodo shuddered as he looked again at the distant pinnacles now dwindling into the night, and the sound of the water seemed cold and cruel. The voice of Morgulduin, the polluted stream that flowed from the Valley of the Wraiths. "What shall we do?" he said. "We have walked long and far. Shall we look for some place in the woods behind where we can lie hidden?" "No good hiding in the dark," said Gollum. "It's in day that hobbits must hide. Now, yes, in day." "Must hide now, yes, in day." "Oh, come," said Sam. "We must rest for a bit, even if we get up again in the middle of the night. There'll still be hours of dark then, time enough for you to take us on a long march, if you know the way." Gollum reluctantly agreed to this, and he turned back toward the trees, working eastward for a while along the straggling edges of the wood. He would not rest on the ground so near the evil road, and after some debate they all climbed up into the crotch of a large olm oak, whose thick branches, springing together from the trunk, made a good hiding place and a fairly comfortable refuge. Night fell, and it grew altogether dark under the canopy of the tree. Frodo and Sam drank a little water and ate some bread and dried fruit, but Gollum at once curled up and went to sleep. The hobbits did not shut their eyes. It must have been a little after midnight when Gollum woke up. Suddenly they were aware of his pale eyes, unlidded, gleaming at them. He listened and sniffed, which seemed, as they had noticed before, his usual method of discovering the time of night. "Are we rested? Have we had beautiful sleep?" he said. "Let's go." "We aren't, and we haven't," growled Sam, "but we'll go if we must." Gollum dropped at once from the branches of the trees to all fours, and the hobbits followed more slowly. As soon as they were down, they went on again, with Gollum leading eastward up the dark, sloping land. They could see little, for the night was now so deep that they were hardly aware of the stems of trees before they stumbled against them. The ground became more broken, and walking was more difficult, but Gollum seemed in no way troubled. He led them through thickets and wastes of brambles, sometimes round the lip of a deep cleft or dark pit, sometimes down into black bush-shrouded hollows and out again. But if ever they went a little downward, always the further slope was longer and steeper. They were climbing steadily. At their first halt they looked back, and they could dimly perceive the roofs of the forest they had left behind, lying like a vast dense shadow, a darker night under the dark blank sky. There seemed to be a great blackness looming slowly out of the east, eating up the faint blurred stars. Later the sinking moon escaped from the pursuing cloud, but it was ringed all about with a sickly yellow glare. At last Gollum turned to the hobbits. "Day soon," he said. "Hobbits must hurry. Not safe to stay in the open in these places. Make haste." He quickened his pace, and they followed him wearily. Soon they began to climb up on to a great hogback of land. For the most part it was covered with a thick growth of gorse and whortleberry. Can't say that because I'm from the South. Whortleberry and low... I'm from Texas, but... Yeah. And low, tough thorns, though here and there clearings opened, the scars of recent fires. The gorse bushes became more frequent as they got nearer the top. Very old and tall they were, gaunt and leggy below, but thick above, and already putting out yellow flowers that glimmered in the gloom and gave a faint, sweet scent. So tall were the spiny thickets that the hobbits could walk upright under them, passing through long dry aisles carpeted with a deep prickly mold. On the further edge of this broad hill-back they stayed their march and crawled for hiding underneath a tangled knot of thorns. Their twisted boughs, stooping to the ground, were overridden by a clambering maze of old briars. Deep inside there was a hollow hall, raftered with dead branch and bramble, and roofed with first leaves and shoots of spring. There they lay for a while, too tired yet to eat, and peering out through the holes in the covert, they watched for the slow growth of day. But no day came, only a dead brown twilight. In the east there was a dull red glare under the lowering cloud. It was not the red of dawn. Across the tumbled lands between, the mountains of the Eiffel Duath frowned at them, black and shapeless below where night lay thick and did not pass away, above with jagged tops and edges outlined hard and menacing against the fiery glow. Away to their right a great shoulder of the mountain stood out, dark and black amid the shadows thrusting westward. "Which way do we go from here?" asked Frodo. "Is that the opening of the Morgul Valley, away over there beyond that black mess?" "Need we think about it yet?" said Sam. "Surely we're not going to move any more today, if day it is." Perhaps not, said Gollum, "but we must go soon. To the crossroads. Yes, to the crossroads. That's the way over there. Yes, master." The red glare over Mordor died away. The twilight deepened as great vapors rose in the east and crawled above them. Frodo and Sam took a little food and then lay down, but Gollum was restless. He could not eat any of their food, but he drank a little water and then crawled about under their bushes, sniffing and muttering. Then suddenly he disappeared. "Off hunting, I suppose," said Sam, and yawned. It was his turn to sleep first, and he was soon deep in a dream. He thought he was back in the Bag End garden looking for something, but he had a heavy pack on his back which made him stoop. It all seemed very weedy and rank somehow, and thorns and bracken were invading the beds down near the bottom hedge. "A job of work for me, I can see, but I'm so tired," he kept on saying. Presently he remembered what he was looking for. "My pipe," he said, and with that he woke up. "Silly," he said to himself as he opened his eyes and wondered why he was lying down under the hedge. It's in your pack all the time." Then he realized, first, that the pipe might be in his pack, but he had no leaf, and next that he was hundreds of miles from Bag End. He sat up. It seemed to be almost dark. Why had his master let him sleep on out of turn, right on till evening? "Haven't you had no sleep, Mr. Frodo?" he said. "What's the time? Seems to be getting late." "No, it isn't," said Frodo, "but the day is getting darker instead of lighter, darker and darker. As far as I can tell, it isn't midday yet, and you've only slept for about 3 hours." "I wonder what's up," said Sam. "Is there a storm coming? If so, it's going to be the worst there ever was. We shall wish we were down a deep hole, not just stuck under a hedge." He listened. "What's that? Thunder? Or drums? Or what is it?" "I don't know," said Frodo. "It's been going on for a good while now. Sometimes the ground seems to tremble. Sometimes it seems to be the heavy air throbbing in your ears." Sam looked around. "Where's Gollum?" he said. "Hasn't he come back yet?" "No," said Frodo. "There's not been a sign or sound of him." "Well, I can't abide him," said Sam. "In fact, I've never taken anything on a journey that I'd have been less sorry to lose on the way. But it would be just like him, after coming all these miles, to go and get lost now, just when we shall need him most, that is, if he's ever going to be any use, which I doubt." "You forget the marshes," said Frodo. "I hope nothing has happened to him." "And I hope he's up to no tricks. And anyway, I hope he doesn't fall into other hands, as you might say, because if he does, we shall soon be in for trouble." At that moment a rolling and rumbling noise was heard again, louder now and deeper. The ground seemed to quiver under their feet. "I think we are in for trouble anyhow," said Frodo. "I'm afraid our journey is drawing to an end." "Maybe," said Sam. "But where there's life, there's hope, as my gaffer used to say, and need of victuals, as he most ways used to add. You have to bite, Mr. Frodo, and then a bit of sleep." Or you have a bite, sorry. The afternoon, as Sam supposed it must be called, wore on. Looking out from the covert, he could see only a dun, shadowless world fading slowly into a featureless, colorless gloom. It felt stifling, but not warm. Frodo slept unquietly, turning and tossing and sometimes murmuring. Twice Sam thought he heard him speaking Gandalf's name. The time seemed to drag interminably. Interminably. Suddenly, Sam heard a hiss behind him, and there was Gollum on all fours peering at them with gleaming eyes. "Wake up! Wake up! Wake up, sleepies!" he whispered. "Wake up! No time to lose! We must go! Yes! We must go at once! No time to lose!" Sam stared at him suspiciously. He seemed frightened or excited. "Go now? What is your little game? It isn't time yet. It can't be tea time even, leastways not in decent places where there is tea time." "Silly," hissed Gollum. "We're not in decent places. Time's running short, yes? Running fast. No time to lose. We must go. Wake up, Master, wake up." He clawed at Frodo, and Frodo, startled out of sleep, sat up suddenly and seized him by the arm. Gollum tore himself loose and backed away. "They mustn't be silly," he hissed. "We must go. No time to lose." And nothing more could they get out of him. Where he had been, and what he thought was brewing to make him in such a hurry, he would not say. Sam was filled with deep suspicion and showed it, but Frodo gave no sign of what was passing in his mind. He sighed, hoisted his pack, and prepared to go out into the ever-gathering darkness. Very stealthily, Gollum led them down the hillside, keeping under cover wherever it was possible, and running almost bent to the ground across any open space. But the light was now so dim that even a keen-eyed beast of the wild could scarcely have seen the hobbits hooded in their grey cloaks, nor heard them walking as warily as the little people can. Without the crack of a twig or the rustle of a leaf, they passed vanished. For about an hour they went on, silently in single file, oppressed by the gloom and by the absolute stillness of the land, broken only now and again by the faint rumblings as of thunder far away or drum beats in some hollow of the hills. Down from their hiding place they went, and then, turning south, they steered as straight a course as Gollum could find across a broken slope that leaned up toward the mountains. Presently, not far ahead, looming up like a black wall, they saw a belt of trees. As they drew nearer, they became aware that these were of vast size, very ancient it seemed, and still towering high, though their tops were gaunt and broken, as if tempest and lightning blast had swept across them, but had failed to kill them or to shake their fathomless roots. "The crossroads, yes," whispered Gollum, the first words that had been spoken since they left their hiding place. "We must go that way." Turning eastward now, he led them up the slope, and then suddenly there it was before them, the southward road, winding its way about the outer feet of the mountains, until presently it plunged into the great ring of trees. "This is the only way," whispered Gollum. "No paths beyond the road. No paths. We must go to the crossroads. But make haste and be silent." As furtively as scouts within the campment of their enemies, they crept down onto the road and stole along the westward edge under the stony bank, gray as stones themselves and soft-footed as hunting cats. At length they reached the trees and found that they stood in a great roofless ring, open in the middle to the somber sky, and the spaces between their immense boles were like the great dark arches of some ruined hall. In the very center, 4 ways met. Behind them lay the road to the Morannon. Before them it ran out again upon its long journey south. To their right, the road from old Osgiliath came climbing up and crossing, passed out eastward into darkness. The 4th way, the road they were to take. Standing there for a moment, filled with dread, Frodo became aware that a light was shining. He saw it glowing on Sam's face beside him. Turning toward it, he saw, beyond an arch of boughs, the road to Osgiliath running almost as straight as a stretched ribbon down, down into the west. There, far away, beyond sad Gondor, now overwhelmed in shade, the sun was sinking, finding at last the hem of the great slow-rolling pall of cloud, and falling in an ominous fire toward the yet unsullied sea. The brief glow fell upon a huge sitting figure, still and solemn as the great stone kings of Argonath. The years had gnawed it, and violent hands had maimed it. Its head was gone, and in its place was set in mockery a round, rough-hewn stone, rudely painted by savage hands, in the likeness of a grinning face with one large red eye in the midst of its forehead. Upon its knees and mighty chair, and all about the pedestal were idle scrolls mixed with the foul symbols that the maggot folk of Mordor used. Suddenly, caught by the level beams, Frodo saw the old king's head. It was lying rolled away by the roadside. "Look, Sam," he cried, startled into speech. "Look! The king has got a crown again." The eyes were hollow, and the carven beard was broken, but about the high, stern forehead there was a coronal of silver and gold. A trailing plant with flowers like small white stars had bound itself across the brows as if in reverence for the fallen king, and in the crevices of his stony hair yellow stonecrop gleamed. "They cannot conquer forever," said Frodo, and then suddenly the brief glimpse was gone. The sun dipped and vanished, and as if at the shuddering of a lamp, black light fell. That is the end of chapter 7. Chapter 8 is called The Stairs of Cirith Ungol, and the first word is was, because the first Gollum, it says Gollum. That's not a word, it's a proper noun. Is that a word? Gollum was. Yes, I gave you 2 words. Perfect. Okay, it looks like JJ's asleep. I don't... maybe. All right, so next chapter is not as short as this one, but also pretty short. So we've got a series of short chapters here, so we will be reading those without breaks, but we will read the next one tomorrow. And I hope that everyone has a great night, and we will see you there. And God bless you. Have a good night.